America pumps more oil than any country in history, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than any nation that has ever drilled a well. And yet most days, foreign tankers still dock along the Gulf Coast. They arrive loaded with oil from somewhere else. That sounds like a contradiction. It is not. It is the whole story. In January 2026, American troops moved before dawn in Caracas. They captured Venezuela's president. Within days, tankers loaded with Venezuelan crude were headed north. That single event raises a bigger question. Why does the world's largest oil producer still need Venezuela's oil? The answer has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with chemistry. It also has to do with geography. And it has to do with decisions made 50 years ago. Decisions nobody has been willing to undo. In 2025, American wells pumped over 13 million barrels a day. That was a record. The same year, the United States imported millions more barrels from abroad. At the very same time, it exported millions of barrels too. Oil left American ports every day. Oil arrived at American ports every day, sometimes on the very same tide. Even after all that trading, the country still came up short. The crude leaving and the crude arriving were not the same thing. They were completely different products. That difference is the real mystery. To understand it, we have to go back in time. For most of the last 50 years, American oil production was falling. Imports kept rising instead. The country looked like it was running out. Then, around 29, something changed. Drillers learned to crack open shale rock. They learned to steer wells sideways for miles underground. The result was one of the fastest oil booms in history. In just 6 years, American production nearly doubled. The country went from fearing shortages to drowning in crude. But there was a problem nobody had planned for. It was not the oil America actually needed. Shale oil is light. It is thin. It has low sulfur. It refines easily. But the great refineries on the Gulf Coast were not built for light oil. They were built for heavy crude. Heavy crude is thick. It is packed with impurities. It takes enormous machines to process it. Those machines are called cokers. A coker takes the sludge at the bottom of a heavy barrel. It cracks that sludge into gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. The bigger the coker, the heavier the oil a refinery can handle. America's Gulf Coast had built some of the biggest cokers on Earth. Feed light oil into a plant like that, and most machinery sits idle. It is like pouring gasoline into a diesel engine. It runs, but it runs badly. Less fuel comes out per barrel. The bill gets higher. That sounds like the whole problem. It is only the beginning. More than half of all American refining happens on the Gulf Coast. Nearly all of it was built for heavy crude. That heavy crude used to come from Venezuela. It also came from Mexico. When Venezuela's oil industry collapsed, the refineries could not rebuild themselves. So they went shopping elsewhere. They found heavy oil in Canada's oil sands. They found more in the Persian Gulf. Then refiners got creative. They started blending oils together. They mixed thin American crude with thick imported crude. That blend matched exactly what their refineries were built to run. Meanwhile, American shale kept overflowing with light oil. So the extra oil sailed to Rotterdam. It sailed to South Korea. It sailed to Japan. Refineries there were built specifically for light oil. America's cleanest crude was not staying in America. At the same time, heavy oil kept arriving from overseas. Every leg of that trade earns someone money. Every leg also ties American prices to decisions made elsewhere. Decisions made in Ottawa. Decisions made in Riyadh. And now, decisions made in Tehran. You can watch this contradiction play out at a single port. Picture the Houston Ship Channel. On one tide, a tanker leaves loaded with Texas oil, bound for Asia. On the same tide, another tanker arrives, carrying oil from Canada or Iraq. They pass each other in the same channel. One country's oil leaving, another country's oil arriving. Geography makes this worse. Most American oil comes from the Permian Basin in West Texas. That basin alone produces nearly half of U.S. output. Far to the north sit Alberta's oil sands. A pipeline was supposed to connect them. It was called Keystone XL. Its permit was revoked in 2021. The company later killed the project. The oil it was meant to carry still moves. It just crawls south by rail instead. It is slower, it is more expensive. Alaska adds another twist to the map. Its oil travels south through a single pipeline. Moving it east costs too much. So most Alaskan oil goes west, to the Pacific coast. Lay all of this on one map. It does not look like energy independence. It looks like a country boxed in by its own pipes. There is a second problem. This one has nothing to do with chemistry. It comes from a law written in 1920. It's called the Jones Act. It says any cargo shipped between two American ports meets an American ship. Built in America, owned by Americans, crewed by Americans. The law was meant to protect wartime shipping. A century later, very few ships still qualify. Building one costs about 4 times as much as building it overseas. Because so few ships qualify, moving oil along the coast gets expensive, sometimes far more expensive than moving it across an ocean. California feels this the hardest. It is cut off from Gulf Coast refineries by mountains. It is cut off again by the Jones Act. California also requires its own special blend of gasoline. Very few refineries outside the state make that blend. In 2025, a fire hit a refinery near Los Angeles. Prices spiked within days. There was no quick backup from Texas. There was no easy backup from abroad either. Sometimes, fuel bound for California takes a strange detour. It gets shipped to the Bahamas first. It gets blended offshore. Then it sails back toward the coast. Not because that route is faster, because it is a way around an old law. In early 2026, the Strait of Hormuz closed. Fuel prices climbed fast. Washington suspended the Jones Act for 30 days. A country that suspends its own shipping law is telling you something simple. It does not have enough ships. Even the Navy shares this same small fleet. A single hurricane can pull a tanker out of rotation. That same tanker might have been fueling a military base. So why not just keep the light oil at home? America already tried that. From 1975 until 2015, crude oil exports were banned outright. The law came from the oil shocks of the 1970s. For 4 decades it held firm. Then the shale boom broke it. Drillers were producing more oil than refineries could use. Storage tanks began filling up. Prices at the wellhead started collapsing. So, in December 2015, Congress lifted the ban. American shale found buyers overseas. Prices stabilized. Producers kept drilling. But that decision also locked in the mismatch. Once light crude had somewhere profitable to go, nothing forced a fix. Why rebuild a refinery when the oil could simply sail elsewhere? Fixing the mismatch stopped being urgent. It became someone else's problem. There is also money hiding inside this mismatch. Heavy crude is usually cheaper to buy. A refinery that can process it buys low. Then it sells gasoline and diesel at full price. The dirtier the barrel, the bigger the profit. The system does not reward the cleanest oil. It rewards refineries that can handle the dirtiest oil. So why not simply retool the refineries? America tried a smaller version of that too. Exxon built one new unit at its Beaumont refinery. It cost $2 billion. It took almost a decade to finish. It only added light oil capacity. It did not touch the heavy processing equipment. Rebuilding the entire system would be far bigger. Estimates put the cost near $300 billion. The timeline would stretch past a decade. No private company wants to write that check. No government has ever funded anything close to that scale. Meanwhile, heavy crude does more than just get refined. It shapes what the country actually produces. Heavy oil yields more diesel, it yields more jet fuel. It feeds the chemical plants that make plastic and fertilizer. Diesel moves trucks. Diesel moves farm equipment. Diesel keeps supply chains running. If refineries shifted to light oil only, diesel supply would tighten. That shortage would hit farming. It would hit shipping. It would hit grocery prices. So the system keeps running the way it always has. Since 2020, the country has lost roughly 1 million barrels a day of refining capacity. Old refineries have shut down. New ones are not being built to replace them. Which brings us to the most important relationship in American energy. Canada now supplies more than half of all US oil imports. Most of it is heavy oil sands crude. For years, the bottleneck was simply getting enough of it out of Canada. Then, in 2024, a new pipeline nearly tripled that export capacity. But that pipeline flows west. It runs toward the Pacific, not south to the United States. Since it opened, Canada has shipped more oil to Asia. A backdoor now exists, and it is being used. Trade disputes between Washington and Ottawa have strained the relationship further. Mexico, the other traditional heavy oil supplier, is fading too. Its aging oil fields keep producing less each year. More of that oil now stays inside Mexico. Less of it reaches American refineries. Every actor inside this system benefits from keeping it unchanged. Shale producers profit from selling oil at global prices. Refiners profit from processing cheap, heavy crude. Shipbuilders profit from the Jones Act. Chemical companies depend on the same heavy oil byproducts. Everyone with power in this system has a reason to protect it. Most days, none of this is visible. The oil moves, the refineries run, the pumps stay full. Then something breaks somewhere in the world, and the whole system reacts at once. In February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. American oil production was near record highs at the time. Within 4 months, gasoline crossed $5 a gallon nationwide. Record production did nothing to soften that shock. American oil is priced against a global benchmark, not a local number. A gas station in Kansas does not check what a Texas well pumped that morning. It simply follows a price set thousands of miles away. When prices spike, the government reaches for its emergency reserve. It is called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Millions of barrels sit stored in underground salt caverns. In 2022, about 180 million barrels were released to calm the market. That reserve fell to its lowest level since the 1980s. It has since been partially refilled, but it still cannot replace a real shortage for long. To understand why this keeps happening, look at one country. A country that was supposed to make all of this unnecessary. Venezuela holds the largest oil reserves on the planet. Larger than Saudi Arabia, larger than Canada, larger than Iraq. Most of it is extra heavy crude. It matches almost perfectly with Gulf Coast refineries. For decades, that oil flowed straight into Houston and Corpus Christi. Then Venezuela's government seized control of its own oil industry. Foreign companies were forced out. Technical expertise praned away. Production collapsed by more than 2/3. Sanctions tightened further over the following decades. Refineries built specifically for Venezuelan crude lost their supplier. Canada filled part of that gap. The Persian Gulf filled another part. Then, in January 2026, everything shifted again. Venezuela's president was captured. He was flown out of the country. A new government quickly agreed to reopen the oil sector. It agreed to do so under American direction. Within weeks, tens of millions of barrels were moving north again. This was not the first time oil shaped a war. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. The United States sent 500,000 troops to push it back. In 2003, America invaded Iraq outright. Iraq held some of the largest heavy crude reserves in the region. 2 decades later, Iraqi oil still reaches American shores. Different decade, different justification, same underlying resource. None of this was really about prices at the pump. It was about keeping a specific heavy kind of oil flowing. That oil does not just fuel cars. It fuels diesel engines. It fuels cargo ships. It fuels jets. It fuels the military supply chain. Losing a heavy oil supplier is not just losing a vendor. It is losing a strategic asset. That is worth a coup. That is worth an invasion. In early 2026, Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz. It is the busiest oil route on Earth. Gasoline prices jumped nearly 30% within weeks. American oil production was still near record highs. It did not matter. The global price moved anyway. Washington released over 170 million barrels from its reserve. It was the largest emergency release in history. Dozens of allied nations joined the release too. All of it triggered by a single closed strait, thousands of miles away. At the very same time, another country was doing the opposite. China has spent recent years quietly building its own reserves. When the next shock arrives, China may hold a deeper cushion. America may be left holding a thinner one. For 50 years, leaders have promised energy independence. The phrase sounds like safety. It paints a picture of a nation that answers to no one. The shale boom seemed to deliver exactly that. The United States became a net oil exporter in 2020, On paper, independence looked achieved, but selling more barrels than you buy is not the same as meeting no one. In recent years, the language has quietly shifted. Energy independence became energy dominance. That shift is more honest than it sounds. Dominance does not mean standing alone. It means needing the rest of the world to stay in line. America has the oil. It built a system for a different kind of barrel, and that single decision, made decades ago, still shapes who gets rich. It still shapes who goes to war. It still shapes who pays more at the pump.